The Pfizer CEO admits that he hasn't taken his own coronavirus vaccine. The Supreme Court hears a case on abortion that could potentially override Roe v. Wade, and Senator Graham accepts the results of the 2020 election. This is your May 18th Not So News update. Please like and subscribe if you're looking for daily news content, and let's dive on in. Starting us off from the Jerusalem Post, Pfizer CEO's Israel visit canceled because he is not fully vaccinated. Apparently, the CEO for Pfizer was supposed to be meeting with President of Israel, Netanyahu, and his trip is being canceled because he is not vaccinated. Notably, Pfizer has created a vaccine for coronavirus. So in the article, Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla has canceled his expected visit to Israel after it turned out he has not been fully vaccinated against coronavirus, and 12 reported Friday. According to the channel, Bourla, as well as members of the delegation that was meant to accompany him during his visit, have not received the second dose of the vaccine. As a result, it was decided to delay the visit by several days, which also posed a logistic challenge because of the upcoming Israeli elections. Bourla said that December that he had not yet received the vaccine yet because he does not want to cut in line, and he would wait until his age group is next in line for getting vaccinated. As such, he has received the first dose but not the second one yet. Notably, I think this isn't really a big story. You might be hearing a lot of news on this on Twitter, saying that he doesn't trust the science or whatever. I think this is actually reasonable. We saw senators, specifically, I believe Ted Cruz and Mark Rubio, do similar things where the individuals in Congress were offered the vaccines but turned it down to wait for their age groups. It seemed like the CEO was doing a similar thing, and now it's saying that he hasn't gotten the second dose. He did get the first dose, which means he has some trust of the science there. And there is a reasonable delay that you're supposed to have when getting the vaccine. Notably, for sending the vaccine, though, Biden is announcing that he's authorizing vaccines to be sent abroad. President Joe Biden plans to send an additional 20 million doses of U.S. coronavirus vaccines abroad by the end of June, including, for the first time, shots authorized for domestic use, where supply is beginning to outstrip demand. What this means is that they are taking shots that were designated to be for U.S. citizens and sending them abroad due to the lack of demand. Biden will announce Monday that he'll export 20 million doses of vaccines from Pfizer, Moderna, or Johnson & Johnson on top of the 60 million AstraZeneca doses he had already planned to give to other countries. According to a senior admin official familiar with the plan, the official who asked not to be identified ahead of the plan's remarks from President stressed the measures are only a first step as the U.S. pivots its attention to quelling the pandemic abroad. Biden has previously pledged that the U.S. would soon become an arsenal of global vaccine supply. Notably, it's going to be kind of interesting to see how this goes year to year. I expect, due to the prolificity of the different variants of coronavirus, that it's going to be a yearly vaccine, kind of like how the flu is currently done, which means every year you're going to need to get a new vaccine, which then begs the question of who's going to be creating these vaccines year to year, and will this now be the new export of the U.S. is, fear-mongering COVID every year. Speaking of fear-mongering, Andrew Cuomo announces that he is ending the New York mask mandate if vaccinated. This is actually very surprising to me. I expected New York to be one of the last states to not give up lockdowns. Specifically, I think Cuomo is doing this due to all the scandals that he has been involved in, but obviously they're able to do this based on the CDC guidance. Coming from the Hill, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo announced on Monday that New York will be adopting the CDC and Prevention's new mask recommendations, allowing fully vaccinated people to go without masks in most places. Effective Wednesday, New York State will adopt the CDC's new mask and social distancing guidance for vaccinated people. Cuomo tweeted, "Unvaccinated people should continue to wear a mask." Cuomo added that masks will still be required on public transport, schools, and some communal settings such as nursing homes, correctional facilities, and homeless shelters. My only comment for this is, what science is he basing that last aspect of? Why are we requiring it on things such as public transport? Does it make sense that the coronavirus just magically stop spreading on the bus? Obviously that just does not make any sense, which goes into the next article coming from the National File. Trust the science. An MIT study confirms anti-maskers understand data better than their opponents. This is something that I've actually been kind of curious about. Specifically, I think that what you see routinely happening is the left giving into more fear-mongering type ideas and trusting the science without actually trusting the science. Instead of trusting the science, they trust individuals, scientists, which then makes it so they're less likely to actually look at the statistics and the numbers. Instead, they just parrot whatever Fauci or Birx are saying. And in this study, it kind of goes into the numbers behind that. In the study, the researchers revealed that despite current narratives that anti-maskers are simply scientifically illiterate, they actually are. That anti-maskers are simply scientifically illiterate. They actually have a very good grasp of science and data analysis. In the Facebook groups they studied, the researchers saw a serious emphasis on originally produced content, with people wanting to make sure they were guided solely by the data. Many participants made their own graphs and instructed others how to access raw data. In other words, anti-maskers value unmediated access to information and privileged personal research and direct reading over expert interpretations, they noted. Its members valued individual initiative and ingenuity, trusting scientific analysis only insofar as they can replicate it themselves by accessing and manipulating the data firsthand. They're highly reflexive about the inherently biased nature of any analysis and resent what they view as the arrogant self-righteousness of scientific elites. This is obviously something you have to look out for in any type of scientific study, is the idea that your conclusions are you have a hypothesis that you're trying to prove, and you can be biased in trying to prove that. Obviously, the scientific methods intended to prevent those types of things, and with how quickly we've been moving with coronavirus measures, there hasn't been ample time for the scientific community to do any type of robust peer review of this type of studies that are being pushed out by things like the CDC. Anti-maskers found themselves not on the side of ignoring science and data, but striving to push for more scientific rigor in their approach to the pandemic. The researchers argued that the users in this community are deeply invested in forms of critique and knowledge production that they recognize as markers of scientific expertise, and added that if anything, anti-mask science has extended the traditional tools of data analysis by taking up the theoretical mantle of recent critical studies of visualization. In fact, the study notes the interpretation of data and science from anti-maskers shows that they are more sophisticated in their understanding of how scientific knowledge is socially constructed than their ideological adversaries who expose a naive realism about the objective truth of public health data. To simply trust the science as the meme espouses is to ignore the fact that data visualizations are not neutral windows into observational independent reality, and that during a pandemic they're an area of political struggle. This is obviously something that we all understood, is that with how forced they're going into these type of studies, that there's going to be bias, it's going to be political, and you can't just trust the science, because oftentimes you're not actually looking at scientific studies. What you're really getting is just information coming from scientific individuals who have their own biases. Speaking of biases, the Supreme Court is taking up a case that is going against a lot of people's personal opinions when it comes to Roe v. Wade. Being reported by Vox, the Supreme Court just took a case that poses a major threat to Roe v. Wade. The legal issue that they're looking at is specifically a case called Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, which is attacking a Mississippi law. The legal issue in Dobbs is straightforward. A 2018 Mississippi law prohibits all abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy, except in medical emergency or in the case of a severe fetal abnormality. Notably, the law applies even before the fetus is viable, meaning that it is capable of surviving outside the uterus. But as the Supreme Court has repeatedly affirmed, the state may not prohibit any women from making the ultimate decision to terminate her pregnancy before viability. Notably, the Supreme Court decided to focus its argument in Dobbs on a single question: whether all pre-viability prohibitions on elective abortions are unconstitutional, which suggests that the court could use this as a vehicle to end the rule providing that an abortion patient gets to make the final decision whether to terminate her pregnancy before viability. The conservative federal appeals court struck down the Mississippi law, with even Judge James Ho, a staunch opponent of abortion, conceding that existing Supreme Court precedent establishes viability as the governing constitutional standard. So notably, what we kind of see here is that there's a standard according to this Mississippi judge that says that the Supreme Court precedent is establishing viability as the constitutional standard. Obviously, the Supreme Court has the ability to overrule that precedent, and the Mississippi judge would then make a ruling based on that to say that the Mississippi law is or is not legal. My personal opinion, I think these types of issues should be left to the state. I think this is a reasonable condition for Mississippi to have, and if an individual in Mississippi doesn't like it, they're more than welcome to move to any of the other states allowing abortion. Coming from Fox News, a Spanish politician is temporarily suspended by Twitter after saying a man cannot get pregnant. This looks at Francisco Jose Contreras, a deputy to Spain's far-right Vox party. Contreras said on Facebook Monday post on May 11th that he had received a message from Twitter which informed that he had violated the policies on hate speech for his remarks. The hateful tweet which I was forced to delete was one that said, "A man cannot get pregnant. A man has no womb or eggs." Contreras wrote in response to the move, "You can see this is already fascist biology. Next time I'll try 2 + 2 = 4. I think that this is actually really stupid. I don't think you have to believe in the transgender movement to participate in Twitter. Specifically, his comments aren't actually attacking a particular individual. I mean, I guess it was in response to a transgender male announcing that they were a father after giving birth. However, my opinion is that his comments, unless they're attacking the specific individual, obviously wouldn't fall into any type of bullying case. And in general, if his comment was just "a man cannot get pregnant," I think that that's a reasonable view that should be allowed on any type of social network, including Twitter. Coming from the Hill, Senator Graham says, "I accept the results of the 2020 election." Senator Lindsey Graham said on Monday that he accepts the results of the 2020 election and urged Republicans, including Trump, to focus on the upcoming midterm in 2020. "I accept the results of the election. 2020 is over to me. I'm ready to march on and hopefully take back the House and Senate in 2022, Graham told reporters in South Carolina. While Graham, who voted to certify the 2020 election in January, said he accepted the results, he added that he would endorse making changes to election laws heading into 2022, including tighter voter ID requirements. "I think what we need to do is reform election systems, so I think it's smart to reform our laws to make sure you are who you are," he said. "I think there are a lot of people that feel like bad things happen in the election, but I think Trump and the Republican Party need to focus on election reform and the upcoming election," he added. This is something I've been saying for a while. I don't believe in any of the machine-based changing of numbers when it comes to the 2020 election. What I do believe is that a lot of states set up policies that disproportionately helped Democrats, and there is a question, in my opinion, whether those are legal or not, specifically looking at a state like Pennsylvania. I don't necessarily know if that's going to, if you looked at all those, that would be enough to do something like change the 2020 result. But I think in general, having a state legislator make policies when it comes to a state election seems perfectly fine to me. And I'm really not a big fan of the federalization of any type of state elections, even if they're for a federal position. Specifically, it's a state that's sending their representative to whatever position. Finally, coming from the Biden administration, they're looking at infrastructure again. Biden has a plan to fix America's broken bridges. It may not be big enough. Notably, we're looking at one of the biggest infrastructure bills ever passed in U.S. history. It is on the order of magnitude of trillions of dollars. And here we have NBC News saying that it's not big enough. Biden's plan would repair 10,000 of the nation's smallest bridges, along with 10 of the most economically significant ones, but an NBC News analysis of data from the Federal Highway Administration found that more than 35,000 of the nation's smallest bridges, those with 2 lanes or less, have been rated in need of repair in their most recent inspection. Biden announced his $2 trillion infrastructure plan in March, which, along other things, proposed rebuilding 20,000 miles of nation's road along with bridges. The plan did not detail which bridges would meet the criteria for repair. NBC News does have the following map that shows kind of just a heat map of where the bridges aren't good. The red marks are the bad ones. Blue is fair, and the gray ones are in good condition. Notably, you kind of see Midwest and those types of areas are kind of the worst. I don't know perfectly where I stand on this type of thing. I'm not convinced that small bridges need to be a federal issue. Unless they're connecting some type of like state border or whatever, that is inherently going to be an interstate issue. I don't know why these type of issues aren't being handled by local states, local counties, or whatever. It seems perfectly fine to say that if a community needs a bridge, they would put the finances up to get it fixed. And I think it's really, in my opinion, I think it's dumb to say that California needs to pay for the bridges of Pennsylvania, and vice versa. And really, that's all I got to say to it. I think federalization needs to be brought back, and this is just one of the instances of where that would make the most sense. And this is your May 18th Not to News update. Once again, please like and subscribe if you're looking for daily news content, and have a good one.